Well, welcome to week 4 of Energy 101. This week, we're focusing on navigating energy transitions, and I am very excited to be joined by a special guest today, David Yeh, who is here to talk to us about climate innovation. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you for having me. I first want to say to Dartmouth students and Dartmouth community, it's a pleasure to talk about climate innovation with you. I hate to say it, but it's actually been 30 years since I was in your shoes. Let me best just kind of tell you a little bit about my background. I am not a professor. I am a practitioner of climate solutions. So I've been an investor. I've worked at the White House. I've been a strategist for over 20 years. Hopefully over the course of the next 10 minutes, I can share with you a practitioner's view of what is climate innovation, why do I do it, and more importantly, a call to actions to the students at Dartmouth and the Dartmouth community.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, and welcome again, David. We're really, really excited to have you here today. So before we actually launch into the questions, I'm gonna throw an extra one in here, which is, can you just really quickly define for us what climate innovation is to you, or what it means?
Okay, that's a great way to start. First, I think we got to ask ourselves a question: why do we innovate? For me, we are innovating so we can create solutions, climate solutions that keep our planet habitable. I think among my community, the community of climate professionals, the most common career rationale is to say that we are saving the planet. But to be honest, the planet is fine with or without us. My wife is a sailor, and she told me one time she was sailing across the Atlantic through a particularly vicious storm. She had this one epiphany: the ocean does not care. And right now, billions of people on our earth are facing floods, fires, droughts, storms of biblical proportion, and it's going to get worse. So I think the work of climate innovation is creating solutions so we all have a habitable planet. We're, in a sense, saving ourselves. But now let's talk a little bit about what is innovation. Climate innovation does not just mean new technology. So the next new solar panel, the better electrolyzer to make green hydrogen, or the next great electric vehicle, those are all great. But I think solutions can come from other areas, and this includes disruptive business models, groundbreaking policy, dynamic grassroots activism, innovative finance, and of course, applied research. So let me share some examples to show what is climate innovation, and more importantly, show it's a big tent. First, let's talk a little bit about business models. For the undergrads here who don't have a business focus, a business model is how a company makes money. There was this company a while back called SunEdison. They were a pioneer of something called the solar lease. They basically created a new innovative financial contract that showed that you did not have to buy a panel to get solar energy, but you could lease one. And the rest is history. Now residential solar is a multi-billion-dollar industry. I think another example is policy and government are also great sources of climate innovation. I used to work at a place called the Loan Programs Office at the Department of Energy. It is a $76 billion sustainable loan program, perhaps the biggest in the world, that provides loans and guarantees to many first of its kind low carbon transportation and clean energy projects. It supported Tesla before it was Tesla by providing a $465 million loan. This helped Tesla buy its first factory, and now Tesla is a $1 trillion company that many people say is the single driving force behind the electrification of global transportation. The LPO also did great things like catalyze the multi-billion-dollar utility solar market. And when I mean utility solar, think millions of panels in the desert rather than on your roof. And they did this by funding the first 5 utility scale solar plants before the mainstream financing markets were ready for that. So my innovation lesson from policy and government is that scaling technologies from the lab to its first commercial plant, and that means large plant, is critical for innovation. It's just not bringing things out of the lab. And the second other innovation lesson I have is that government is a strategic ally for innovation, and arguably one of the most important players. Maybe my last example of innovation for climate that goes beyond technology is finance. I used to work at a place called Generation Investment Management. It is now nearly a $40 billion sustainable investment firm. But 20 years ago, it was launched by David Blood and Al Gore. Their innovation was integrating rigorous sustainability research and analysis into long-term investing. At that time, if you mentioned ESG in finance, that was a career killer. Sustainability, or the word green, was a code word for philanthropy. But Generation Investment Management proved the world wrong. It showed that integrating sustainability thinking into finance was a source of superior returns. And now the world has caught up with Generation. There are now trillions of dollars from global asset managers directed towards net zero finance, which means getting to net zero emissions by 2050. So there are many, many more examples of innovation, but I only have 10 minutes.
I have a really quick follow-up question, which is, what is ESG?
So ESG stands for environment, social, and governance. Those are kind of the three pillars on how you measure a company's sustainability performance. I'm sorry for throwing out climate acronyms.
No problem. Thank you for defining that for us. Okay, so the next question I'm going to ask you is, in what ways can climate innovation reduce our systemic inequities and maybe at the same time help us actually decarbonize our energy systems?
So there are kind of three ways I think about climate justice. One, climate change is blind. Now, climate catastrophes do not see the difference between rich and poor, old and young, and the global north and the global south. However, the less resource communities, whether they be poor, sick, disenfranchised, have less resources to recover from the next storm or fire of the century. And then my last way I think about climate justice is that we cannot move forward on a low carbon, sustainable society if anyone's left behind. The sustainable revolution can only move as far or as fast as progress that Indigenous people, people of color, blue collar workers, and the global South make. And this includes bringing in their insights, talents, and support. And there are a few examples I have around climate innovation as a champion of climate justice. One is the future of our energy system is a distributed energy system. This means solar panels on roofs, EV chargers on the side of the road, batteries in our homes and buildings, and smart grids, as well as microgrids. These things are faster to build, easier to permit, lower price tags, more resilient, and usually inherently lower carbon. These benefits of distributed energy broaden energy access and resilience. But more importantly, I think my innovation lesson is that distributed energy innovation and many other innovations of today in climate allow the developing world to leapfrog the developed world. Right now, the developed world has built our energy system essentially around one big fossil fuel plant with big transmission wires hundreds of miles away, beaming energy to its customers. The grid of the future, the energy system of the future, will be a microgrid. It will be distributed. And the countries in the global South, in the developing world, can climate-proof, future-proof all their energy systems today. And then one other thing I'd like to add is that climate justice. In our country, the US, it's communities of color and poor neighborhoods that are often on the front lines of health and climate. Their homes, their schools are next to factories, mines, oil and gas wells, and even highways. These people suffer from higher rates of asthma, cancer, and other maladies. And in my own home of Portland, Oregon, there's a historic Black middle school called Harriet Tubman that's built right next to the I-5 freeway. The kids there are breathing exhaust of tens of thousands of trucks and cars every day. But imagine a world where the I-5 is populated by EVs with zero emissions. And there are thousands of Harriet Tubmans in this country. So those are two examples. Again, happy to dig into more if you're interested.
All right. Thank you so much for that, David. So the next question I have is, are there any new technologies that we should be on the lookout for?
Well, I would start with tackling the hardest problems. Right now, decarbonization, which means decarbonizing our hardest industries and our biggest polluters like concrete or steel, are very, very critical to making our planet habitable. It also means doing moonshot technologies like direct air capture, which is essentially sucking carbon dioxide from the air. And it also means things like scaling green hydrogen, which is seen by many as the ultimate low carbon energy carrier molecule. And let's not forget also nature-based solutions. But I think for me, the new technologies that we should look for are not on the map, they're off the map. And it'll be these solutions that will make possible for us to have a 1.5 degrees Celsius world. And these are the solutions that aren't discussed by energy pundits. They aren't discussed by venture capitalists. I think there's a recent lesson from history around energy that I think will be especially important. The two biggest game changers around energy have been fracking and the unprecedented growth in solar and wind renewable energy. In 2012, energy experts such as the International Energy Agency expected that global solar energy generation would reach 550 terawatts by 2030. And that's a lot of energy. But that number was reached and exceeded by 2018. So what energy experts, PhDs, thought would take 18 years took only 6. Experts rationally often assume that growth will be predictable and linear. But the one thing I'd like to say to the audience, never underestimate the exponential power of innovation. Another thing I'd like to highlight is fracking. Fracking is the use of horizontal drilling and the fracturing of shale to produce oil and gas. This technology has made the US, not Saudi Arabia, the largest producer of oil in the world. I think we produce almost twice the amount of oil that Saudi Arabia produces. But again, the energy experts not notice that happened until it happened. So that, I think, is a sense of kind of hope in the power of innovation for climate.
All right, thank you for that. So I have one final question for you, which is, there's obviously a lot of challenges in meeting our climate goals to kind of avoid the worst outcomes of climate change. What are your biggest reasons for optimism right now?
So when we've been talking about climate solutions, we've been talking about financing solutions, technology solutions, government solutions. But I think the greatest climate solution is hope and action. Right now, if we have done nothing, the temperature change in our Earth would be roughly 4 to 5 degrees Celsius. But because of collective action, we've brought it down to 2 to 3 degrees Celsius. That is meaningful. So what we are doing now does count. I think the question is, however, are we doing enough? To be honest, no. But that is where the Dartmouth community and the Dartmouth students come in. Every 10th of a degree of warming that we stop and that we abate makes a difference. Everyone on this Zoom call has potential to be the next Elon Musk. So for me, my call to action to everyone is, how are you going to be part of the climate solution? How are you going to be part of climate innovation? Will you try to launch the next Tesla? Will you try to do groundbreaking research? Will you move to Washington, D.C. and try to pass green laws? Or are you going to organize at Dartmouth and be the Greta Thunberg for New Hampshire?
Thank you. That's such a great note to end on. Thank you again so much for being with us, David. We really appreciate you talking to us.
Well, it's been my pleasure. And thank you so much.
Okay, thank you again so much to David for joining us. Now, next up in the series, we'll be talking with April Salas, who is the Executive Director for the Revers Center for Energy, Sustainability, and Innovation. We'll see you there. Bye-bye.